Yeah, just to come together and help Ukraine, and we hope that by showing strength in numbers and teaming together and consolidating our efforts, we can show the world how important it is to bring attention to the tragic current events. So next, I will introduce my Vice President, Christine, to introduce our first speaker. Kind of just going to go along with it. We've got a lot to get through.
Thank you, Victoria. Hello, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join us here to commemorate the innocent lives lost. Today, we will be commemorating all the lives that have been lost during the current war in Ukraine. As of April 5th, at least 1,232 civilians and 161 children have been killed. At least 264 children and 1,459 other civilians were injured. On March 12th, Ukrainian President Zelensky estimated about 1,300 Ukrainian servicemen had been killed in action. But these are the lowest of estimates, and the true numbers are much greater. Our first speaker is Dr. Leo Wolonsky from the UConn School of Medicine. Dr. Wolonsky is a professor and chair of the Diagnostic Imaging and Therapeutics Center, and is the president of the Ukrainian Medical Association of North America. It is a great honor to have him join us here today.
Our sense of human dignity has again been attacked by the images of war crimes being inflicted on the Ukrainian people by the Russian Federation. It's somewhat comforting that increasing numbers of world leaders are using the term war criminal in dealing with Vladimir Putin. Obviously, the Russian Federation started an unprovoked war characterized by indiscriminate bombing of civilian areas, hitting countless hospitals, schools, and homes of people. Now the images of Bucha open our eyes to torture and execution-style killing of helpless citizens. Is it genocide? Well, genocide has been defined as the systematic destruction of a nation or an ethnic group. Some have said that more evidence needs to be gathered prior to labeling this genocide. It's true that the war has only been taking place for a few weeks, so let's reflect on this. When we had our first vigil for Ukraine a few days ago, I took you back in time before there was internet, when totalitarian regimes could completely control the flow of information. Back to 1918, to the Battle of Krutych. I shared with you the personal story of my grandfather, Ivan Shadi, who wrote the first eyewitness account of the battle. In his account, he described how Moscow's Red Guard planned to place the shackles of slavery back on the hands of the newly independent Ukrainian nation. He compared the Red Guard to wild, famished, vicious, bloodthirsty animals in his evocative and poetic essay. I told you how, in the fall of 1929, the secret police came to his home and arrested Ivan, and how his 7-year-old daughter, Lyudmila, my mother, watched in horror. Ivan was tortured and executed. Over the next several years, countless Ukrainian intellectuals and community leaders were persecuted and killed. Among the victims were Ukrainian religion and culture. Churches were destroyed and priests were arrested. Then the Kobzari became the next victims. Kobzari, or Banduristi, were the national bards, a practice of tradition that dated back centuries, singing ballads of the great Ukrainian Cossacks. During Stalin's regime, the Kobzari were summoned under false pretenses to a convention, but were greeted by a firing squad. In Stalin's eyes, the legends of the great Cossacks had to be erased. Then in the 1930s, Stalin's regime seized Ukrainians' wheat and exported most of it, leading to the starvation of up to 8 million Ukrainians. My mother was an eyewitness, having seen starving Ukrainian villagers staggering into Kyiv, where she was living. and having seen the road littered with other less fortunate villagers' corpses. A century ago, it was Stalin. Today, it's Putin. Obviously, the Russian Federation is filled with Putin's accomplices. Without them, none of this would be possible. In 1929, my mother was a 7-year-old who saw her father dragged away to his doom. In 2022, somewhere in Ukraine, another 7-year-old girl named Lyudmila watches her parents getting butchered. Is this genocide? It's time for the world to face the truth. Slava Ukraini.
So yeah, as you all know, we were supposed to kind of have this in the Student Union Terrace, but I'm kind of glad that we are all here together and we can come together in comfort and still have this be a reality. And thank you, Dr. Wolanski, for those words. I think it's so impactful to hear those first account stories and share that. And they're just such impactful sentiments when they come truly from those Ukrainian voices. So we thank you for coming today. Next, our next speaker will introduce Dr. Glenn Matoma. Dr. Matoma is a faculty member in the Human Rights Department and is the director of the Dodd Human Rights Impact. With his involvement in genocide education, we are honored to hear from Dr. Matoma today.
Thank you, Victoria and Christina, and to everyone who's organized tonight's event. I'm grateful to be included and to be a part of this, and thank you, Dr. Wolanski, for those remarks and sharing the memory of your parents, Lyudmila and Ivan, and all of the other victims of violence and of terror. I want to talk a little bit about memory and about remembering together and its import. So the Russian attack on the Ukraine is a violation of international law, a human rights catastrophe, and an affront to human dignity. It is right that we gather here in memory of the lives lost and the fundamental and forever change, and those fundamentally and forever changed by the violence of this war. Stories emerging from Bucha and soon from Mariupol and elsewhere tell of horrors and great sorrow. Horrors and sorrow that are all too familiar to scholars of violence and atrocity and genocide. Stories familiar from Warsaw to Nanjing, My Lai to Aleppo. Even as the war rages, it's right that we gather here to begin to remember the horror and to remember and to honor the unique, sacred, and meaningful lives of each and every victim of this war. Their stories must be told and they must be heard. And not only the stories of their deaths, but the stories of their lives, of their families, of their friends, of their community, and their culture. And it's right that we begin now, even when we don't know as many of the names as we will, because memory is a practice. It is active, and it must be continually exercised in order to keep it strong. Because the danger is, of course, if we don't remember, then we forget. Forgetting them, forgetting all of them, would be a double erasure, because that is what those who are behind this war want. The erasure of Ukraine and of the Ukrainian people. To pretend that they never existed. This is the logic behind genocide. In this way, memory is a form of resistance against the perpetrators. Documented and compiled, it is also true that memory serves as evidence to hold perpetrators accountable for their crimes. And at the Dodd Center, we have a collection from the International Military Tribunal at Nuremberg that documents exactly how we will prosecute the violators of the perpetrators of this war. It's there that you see how memory turns to evidence. It's also there today that you see how evidence turns to memory. And we return again and again to that memory of Nuremberg in order to come to a new understanding, not only of the depth of violation, but the possibility of triumph. So our commemoration here tonight honors the victims and resists the perpetrators. It also creates for us a kind of community. Memory is an active practice, yes, but it is also a shared practice. That's why we call it a co-memoration, because we do it in community. We do it together. And the kind of community it creates is a community that is responsible for the great mantra of Holocaust memory, never again. Now, when the Dodd Center opened its doors in 1995, the great Holocaust survivor and witness Elie Wiesel spoke at the dedication. And he focused particularly on what the memory of the Holocaust embodied at the Nuremberg trial represents. This is what he said. So what do we today do with the memory of Nuremberg? We learn, we teach, in other words, we share. In other words still, he went on, we believe that memory must open a channel to human rights. In sharing this commemoration of memory for those lost to the war in Ukraine, we say, we honor you, we denounce your killers, and we commit to the long work for justice for you and all other victims of atrocity. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mantova. Memory is a form of resistance, and we will never forget these atrocities that happened to the Ukrainian people. First, we will introduce Sonia Zazulak from our few student speakers from our organization. Sonia is the current secretary of the Ukrainian Student Association and is a junior studying molecular and cell biology. Her family is from Vigil in the western part of Ukraine, and she speaks fluent Ukrainian, attended Ukrainian school, and travels to Ukraine frequently. She's excited to have been selected as the next president for next school year for the Ukrainian Student Association. And she would like to share her thoughts today about the recent mass murders in Ukraine. Please welcome Sonia.
I just wanted to firstly thank everybody for coming today. It really means a lot. Like many of my fellow Ukrainians that are sat up here and sat in the crowd, my life changed on the morning of February 24th, 2022. From the moment I woke that morning, with multiple news notifications on my phone, frantic messages from my family in Ukraine, and multiple missed calls from my parents, my focus completely changed. My focus was no longer on the exam I had next week, what my plans were for the weekend, or that I had to go grocery shopping the next day. My focus became fully rooted on the lives and safety of my family, the security of my country, and the existence of our Ukrainian identity and spirit. I can truthfully say that I cannot remember crying so much in one day. I cannot remember feeling so truly broken, my heart battered with grief. In the days that followed, I found myself in a state of numbness. Anxiety and fogs of gray followed me as I trudged myself meaninglessly through my classes and my day-to-day life. The days and weeks trickled by without distinction, and my life here became to seem so insignificant compared to what my family members and friends were going through in Ukraine. As time went on, I found myself becoming numb to the daily announcements of new bombings and airstrikes. Now that grief and numbness has turned into pure anger. After 43 days of war, today marks exactly 6 weeks since the invasion began. We begin to see the true colors of Putin and the Russian army. The horrors and atrocity of Bucha, Irpin, Hostomel, and Mariupol are absolutely unfathomable to even imagine. People of every age lying dead on the sides of the streets. Civilian men shot in the head brutally with their hands bound behind their backs. Women raped in front of their children. Murdered children tortured to death with burns scorched into their flesh. Naked women lying dead in the street with rubber tires in an attempt to burn their bodies. Entire cities of people being forcefully starved and trapped inside rubble that remains of their homes. These images will forever be engraved in my memory. Witnessing such unspeakable horrors enlists such rage in me. For how can such inhumanity exist in the day and age in which we live? Not only does it exist, it thrives. Russian soldiers have shown to not only be looters and robbers, but barbaric torturers, rapists, and murderers to the entire world. And yet they walk free and continue their reign of terror upon the innocent men, women, and children of Ukraine. With the images that have surfaced from Bucha and Mariupol, they are so strikingly similar to those of the atrocities committed by Nazi Germany in the Second World War. We have said never again, but here we are again, witnessing the very same. The goal of Putin and the complicit barbarians carrying out his satanic orders is to destroy the Ukrainian spirit. But spirit is what his soldiers are desperately lacking. Putin believes that by committing senseless atrocities on our land and to our people that we will be weakened and disheartened. He does not understand that this is his fatal mistake. For every single drop of blood spilled, every tear shed, it ignites a fire within every single Ukrainian man, woman, and child to fight stronger and hate harder. The world has seen our spirit and it will never be broken. Of this I am certain. Today we gather to mourn the innocent lives stolen by the Russian invaders. We gather to honor the sacrifices made by the incredible courage of both Ukrainian soldiers and civilians. May their sacrifices never be forgotten and their stories never be silenced. I will end with this phrase, "Все буде добре," or everything will be good. It is the new motto of Ukrainians. Still in the face of unspeakable evil, we believe that everything will be good. Slava Ukraini.
Thank you for that very heartfelt speech. I relate to that in so many remarks, and I think that you speaking really speaks on behalf of all the students that are impacted here. So thank you for that. Next, we will be hearing from Stefania Koronovsky. Stefania is a first-year student majoring in healthcare management and global health. She is a first-generation Ukrainian American from East Haven, Connecticut, and she will be speaking about the support she has received at UConn.
It has been 42 days since my life changed forever. For 42 days, I witnessed unimaginable atrocities occurring in my homeland. 42 days, and I'm still shattered inside, just as I was the moment the war broke out in Ukraine. For me and all Ukrainians around the world, February 24th will forever mark the day that time stopped. I can't tell you the last time I went to sleep without having nightmares or even sleeping through the entire night. My conscience, my news feeds, my conversations with friends and family are flooded with information and questions about what's happening in Ukraine. Some of the most difficult questions to answer are as simple as, are you okay? How is your family doing? All I can say is, no one is okay, and no one will be okay as long as this war goes on. Since February 24th, I've struggled with maintaining a focus on my academics and school life in the midst of the war in Ukraine, just like many of our other Ukrainian students here. For a long time in the beginning, I had felt like I could not talk to anyone, especially faculty, because even if I did reach out, what are the chances they'd actually care? However, I'm glad to have had the opportunity to sit down with people like the Dean of the School of Business and felt the support of the Dean of the College of Agriculture, Health, and Natural Resources. These individuals were incredibly engaged, to my surprise, in what I had to say. They gave me the opportunity to tell my story, and in that, they themselves gained a better understanding of the situation. I would also like to mention the support I received from friends and UConn students and coworkers and staff. Whether I knew them or not, people were reaching out to me on social media and even in person, asking to donate, voicing their support, and actively trying to educate themselves.
Knowing that I have the support is really comforting, but it is also incredibly difficult to remember sometimes. Ukraine has faced the vile attacks of the Russian military for 42 days. Innocent civilians, children, women, men, elderly people, even animals, all greeted daily with the bloodthirstiness of Putin and his Russian forces. I pray every day that the next time I call my friends and family in Ukraine, they're not answering from a bunker or a basement. I pray that the families fortunate enough to leave Ukraine and find refuge in surrounding European countries will have the opportunity to safely return to their home. I pray that the next conversation I have with my mother, it doesn't begin and end in tears. I pray that the next time I read the news, it doesn't contain horrific details of the inhumane and targeted genocide of the Ukrainian people. I pray for the people of Bucha, Mariupol, Irpin, Lviv, Kharkiv, the Donbass. I pray for Ukraine because it is who I am. I pray every night and day that someday I will be able to return and see for myself the rich, beautiful, and brave Ukraine I love so deeply. Slava Ukraini!
Thank you, Stefania, for your heartfelt words. This concludes our speaker portion of the program, and we will be moving on to a break in our commemoration activities. So everyone have that little square note with them. So we are going to use that for our prayer board right over on that chair. So if you have a pen, please write a prayer or intention that you have for the Ukrainian people, and we will start a line to sort of pin it up. As you pin up your prayer, we're going to hand out flameless candles for our candles. We have extra pens up here if you need a pen.
Okay, thank you for that and contributing to it. Now you can see we have a beautiful Ukrainian flag and all our little post-its. So does everyone have a candle? Now that we've kind of taken a moment to look back and think of the thoughts and prayers that we want to have in our minds, we're going to take a few minutes to meditate on those prayers that we've written. And while we do reflect back on these thoughts, we would like to show a video that plays the song Pliva Kacha, or as in English, the duckling swims. And while this is an old Ukrainian folk song, it was given new light in February 2014 when Ukrainians protested governmental decisions to not sign the European Union-Ukraine Association Agreement, and when the government chose stronger ties to Russia. So during these protests, dozens of people were killed by snipers, and this song was used to memorialize their lives. And so the song is a dialogue between a mother and her son, who is going off to war. Some lyrics, such as, "My dear mother, what will happen to me if I die in a foreign land? Well, my dearest, you will be buried by other people. speak to the current state many Ukrainians are currently in as they fight for their freedom. We hope that by hearing this, you can all sympathize with all the heavy emotions that are haunting the Ukrainian people currently. Perfect. Cool, yeah, so if you could all turn on your cameras, that would be awesome. And yeah, and so this is for that gotcha. Following that, we would just like to now just take a moment of silence, kind of thinking about all those prayers that you have in your mind, thinking about all the lives that have already been lost, all the lives that have been torn apart, and just taking a moment to think about all the people suffering in Ukraine right now. So if you can just join me in a moment of silence. thank you for that.
Thank you everyone for taking that moment of silence. We have 2 more commemoration activities. The next activity is the Ukrainian national anthem. Ukraine has a rich history of over 1,500 years that is abundant with culture, art, literature, and the ongoing fight for freedom. Ukraine officially gained its freedom from the Soviet Union in 1991 after 92.3% of people voted for independence. The national anthem is a tribute to Ukraine's continuous fight for freedom, as its title, Ще не вмерла Україна, translates to Ukraine is not yet dead. So we will play this video and it has an English translation.
So the last thing we would just like to commemorate, we originally intended, if this was outside, to have a ceremony to lay down the flowers that we have here in the shape of a trident, also known as a trizub. And so this is the Ukrainian coat of arms. The coat of arms of Ukraine is a symbol of freedom. And so I know when we were all younger and attending Ukrainian school and Ukrainian youth groups, the kids were taught how to draw out the trizub by using the letters of the word voля. And so that's what you see spelled out here in voля. It has 2 meanings. The first meaning is freedom, and the second meaning is will. And this symbol represents Ukraine's will to fight for freedom. In lieu of this ceremony, we will be handing out flowers, and we'd like them to be placed in Swan Lake, outside of the chemistry building. And I also want to take a moment to thank the donations that we received from Dawson's Florist as well as Wildflowers of Tallinn. They were so generous as to put together these fantastic arrangements for us. So as a conclusion to our ceremony and our vigil today, and being able to commemorate all you being here present with us, we'd like to distribute these flowers, and so on your way out you can drop them in the lake. So that's all we have for you. Thank you again for coming and supporting and continue to support. We handed out the flyers of how you can help Ukraine with QR codes to different resources. So we hope that you can share that and that you can utilize those. Also, kind of as a keepsake for you coming here, if you'd like to take a little Ukrainian flag, we have those that we'd like to distribute, just to show your support as well. So thank you all.